Zdenkovac bei Skopje. Der UNHCR hat die Flüchtlinge ausgewählt. Familien sollten nicht auseinandergerissen werden. Täglich werden rund 2000 Flüchtlinge ausgeflogen. Dennoch stehen die Nachbarländer des Kosovo kurz vor dem Kollaps. Allein Mazedonien hat inzwischen 240.000 Flüchtlinge aufgenommen.
Dazu vergleichsweise ist die Zahl, die in andere Länder gelangt ist, relativ bescheiden. Das sind knapp 40.000. Und wir werden also uns darum bemühen, auch bei unseren Mitgliedsländern der Europäischen Union dafür zu werben, dass auch dort die Flüchtlingsaufnahme fortgesetzt wird.
Sollte dieser Appell auch Ergebnisse nach sich ziehen, will auch Deutschland weitere 5.000 Flüchtlinge aufnehmen.
Incursions, Adrian, have occurred about 3 or 4 hours up the border from where we are at the moment. It's a place where the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, are known to be strong. It happened in a village called Kasaj, which is just inside Albania, maybe a couple of kilometers or so. We understand that something like 50 Serb Yugoslav army forces came across the border to this place called Kasaj. It sounds like there was an almighty great gun battle between the KLA and the Serb forces, and as many as 30 KLA were wounded and possibly 2 or 3 were killed. These are all unconfirmed reports, but it does seem to be one of the more serious excursions by the Serb forces into Albania, but one of many that have taken place over the past few weeks.
Presumably it's skirmishes like these that are making the aid agencies concerned about the safety of refugees still in the border area.
They are very concerned indeed. There's now a real big push on by the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, plus the other NGOs, the non-governmental organizations here, try and get people away from this area. This town here, maybe 100,000 people, we're just about 10-15 kilometers from the border, and the authorities fear that the Serbs may, at one point or another, decide just to teach these refugees a lesson, maybe try and pick off KLA posts in and around these refugee camps, and they might try and lob in some shells into these camps. So they want to get these people to move very much further down the mountain, further south, but they're not meeting with much success at the moment. Adrian, I've just come from a briefing from the UNHCR, and they describe it as an overwhelmingly modest response from these refugees. In all, yesterday, they managed to get 288 people out of hundreds of thousands of people to sign up to say they will go down the mountain. So a very modest response at the moment.
So first evidence of what the Serbs say is a partial troop withdrawal from Kosovo. It's a move already condemned by NATO as a half measure. And there's nothing to say this is any more than a regular troop rotation. But it's certainly evidence that the propaganda offensive continues. It comes at a time of ever-increasing NATO activity. Last night, the alliance hit a wide variety of targets across Yugoslavia. In Moscow, Western overtures to President Yeltsin have gained an added urgency because of Russia's renewed political turmoil. President Chirac of France is the latest Western leader to arrive to try to enlist Russian support. The cordial greetings contain no hint of yesterday's threat by the Russian leader to break off cooperation with NATO. But the West knows it could lose Russia's vital diplomatic mediation if President Yeltsin gets distracted by an ugly battle with his parliament. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson, is meeting President Milosevic in Belgrade today. It could prove a lively exchange. Yesterday, Mrs. Robinson saw NATO bomb damage in the city of Niš. The Yugoslav government clearly wants to use the visit for its own advantage. But it could also be another opportunity to open a dialogue with the United Nations. John Lyne, BBC News.
Well, Nick will be dealing with the crisis in Kosovo a bit later on in the programme. Meanwhile, I'll give you some other news.
And 31,000 refugees have now fled across the border into Albania. In Macedonia, there are 234,000. The pressures on the Macedonian government remain acute. 64,000 have crossed into Montenegro and another 18,000 into Bosnia-Herzegovina. Well, in a moment, the UN's urgent appeal to governments for money to finance the purchase of food and tents to allow the relocation of refugees. But first, another problem. Why worries about their tractors mean many Albanian refugees won't relocate. Our correspondent Duncan Kennedy.
Forget trains and boats and planes. Kosovo is a tragedy driven on by tractors. Isak Salok and his family have just been forced out of their home by Serbs, and the only thing they have left is their tractor. Refugee agencies want people to leave the border area because of the dangers of Serb shelling. even if it means temporarily leaving their tractors behind. But for Isak, that's not an option. I can't lose this tractor, he says. It's the only thing I have left now. For thousands like Isak in northern Albania's refugee camps, tractors are treasures. They are washing lines, they are toys, and they are beds. The authorities say they'll provide fuel and mechanics for the journey, but still many are suspicious. It isn't just that these tractors are their only possession. It isn't just that they want to stay close to the border, close to home. It's the sheer practicality of it. Many of these vehicles simply aren't up to leaving these refugee camps. Chef Chet Fasholi says he's heard it's a bad road further south and is worried about his tractor. Sally Nahoui from the United Nations Refugee Agency tries to convince him it's too dangerous to stay here. But in this camp he's managed to persuade just 10% to go. And the UN faces other problems, from the fact that as the camps get better, fewer people want to move, to the pressure on the refugees to stay to join the Kosovo Liberation Army. Many thousands have said they will move, but convincing people danger could follow them across the border is turning out to be a difficult job. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, Kukes, Northern Albania.
Well, what about this?
At this particular point in time, yes, and I must stress that we have to start purchasing to prepare for the winter. We're going to need special tents to house these people in the winter months. In areas such as Korče, where we've got large numbers of refugees from Macedonia who've come into Albania, where we expect greater influxes, both moving people down from the north of Albania and moving people from Macedonia, the temperatures there get to -30. The flimsy cotton tents these people are in at present will be fine for the summer, but totally inadequate for the winter.
So when we see these images of the few thousand who have agreed to go south in Albania to maybe Korče or Tirana or Durrës, what are they going to get when they get to the other end? Are you saying there aren't literally the tents at the other end because you can't go out and buy them?
We don't have sufficient tents most definitely at this particular point in time, but more concerningly, as I said before, for the winter, we won't have the tents necessary to house them in. The last thing we want to do is force them into overcrowded, solid accommodation which already has large numbers of people living in it. There's no room at the inn, so to speak.
Okay, there's no room at the inn, there's no money in the coffers. So what do you do in this situation?
The attacks were focused particularly in the Prizren, Suvorika and Udnik areas, and as you can see, were made against a wide range of armor, military vehicles and troop positions. It's an indication of the growing pressure NATO is applying to Serb forces in Kosovo and our increasing success rate. A full range of other targets were also successfully attacked in the operational region as a whole, including airfields in Obra and Batanica, highway bridges in Olate and Milisevo, and military communication sites in Kosovoska, Novi Sad and Stara Pazova. All NATO aircraft returned safely.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today's briefing. Last night, as you know, NATO carried out an extensive and effective series of attacks against the Yugoslav ground forces in Kosovo. NATO struck several armoured vehicles. Also, near Pristina, artillery positions, as well as troops and vehicles. We also struck at troops and vehicles and again artillery near Suvoreka and east of Orosevac. But last night we concentrated our efforts notably in the western part of Kosovo, attacking troops, armour and artillery west of Jakovica and all the way south towards Prizren. Now these attacks, together with those of yesterday, show that we are focusing now with success on those who are responsible for the killing. Those who once did all of the heavy shooting are now on the receiving end. Instead of hounding, they are being hounded. And this is the way it will continue until President Milosevic and his regime accept the 5 conditions of the international community. Stop the killing, pull out your forces, allow an international security force, let the refugees go home, and agree to negotiate seriously. Now, President Milosevic and his regime in Belgrade hasn't yet agreed. to recognize and respect those 5 key demands. But at least President Milosevic has begun to recognize reality. He said yesterday, on the eve of Yugoslavia's Security Day, a strange title in today's circumstances, that, I quote, "Many members of the security forces bravely gave their lives and their sacrifice, and this is a bright example of their heroism and loyalty to their people and fatherland." So President Milosevic, at least now, is acknowledging that his forces have paid and are paying a heavy price for their activities in Kosovo. This is one of his statements which is undoubtedly true. But I'd like to emphasize that all of those Yugoslav soldiers did not have to leave their lives in Kosovo. Milosevic had many opportunities to settle this crisis peacefully. Even his adversaries, the Kosovo Liberation Army, agreed to bury the war hatchet, and they signed the Rambouillet peace agreement. But to paraphrase Frank Sinatra, President Milosevic preferred to settle it his way.
The Prizren, Stimlje, Suvareka, and Unique areas. Targets included the 211th, the 125th, and the 243rd Brigades. We hit armor, revetted vehicles, trucks, artillery and mortars, troops in the open, and a surface-to-air missile vehicle. Our operations began with an early morning strike package which successfully attacked bridges at Milosevo and Orlete, military vehicles and armor near Prizren, a storage tunnel, the SAM-6 site near Prizren, SAM standing for surface-to-air missile. By mid-morning, a package including Jaguars, F-16s, Harriers, Itondars, and EA-6Bs, Prowler, hit numerous targets, including the radio relay station at Mitrovica, an artillery position near Prizren, and the Murina Highway Bridge. Midday operations included strikes against petroleum facilities near Pirane, plus a command post, several tanks, and armored vehicles in southern Kosovo. So in summary, this slide shows the targets we struck last night within Kosovo. We also destroyed 5 aircraft in the open. It was 1 MiG-21 and 4 Super Gallops, the MiG-21 at Niš Airfield and the other 4 on an airstrip near Prizren. Coordination of our air assets was once again very effective. To give you an example on that, one of our unmanned reconnaissance vehicles located a vehicle refueling point near Prizren. We quickly redirected a flight of fighters and destroyed the storage area and several fuel trucks within less than an hour. In addition to our air operations in Kosovo, we also attacked strategic targets in Yugoslavia, including Ovra and Batanica airfields, radio relay sites at Stara Pazova and Novi Sad, plus others as shown on the slide. Bear in mind what I have said over and over again. Numbers as such are not a very precise indication of combat capability of a unit. The shortages of food, fuel, ammunition, the latter leading to a decrease and a reduction of morale of the soldiers, must also be taken into consideration. Since my presentation last week concerning the Serbian ground forces in Kosovo, where I told you we had destroyed 306 pieces of heavy equipment, we have now raised this figure up to 432. We have now struck over 20% of his critical inventory. Additionally, we have in the meantime destroyed 2/3 of the Serbian ammunition production capacity. In fact, this image shows a post-strike assessment of the Kachak ammunition production plant. You will notice significant damage as indicated by the circles. In particular, Please note the absolute destruction of the building in the upper right of the picture. Our bombs hit the building, but the massive destruction you see is a result of the secondary explosion of ammunition stocks within the building. This, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my portion of today's operational briefing.
In the left corner, you can see the total number of displaced refugees moved into the various nations. Yesterday, 2,586 refugees flew out of third countries, and about 1,500 refugees are planned to depart today. Concentration. The majority of refugees over the last few days come from Mitrovica. They were among the most traumatized refugees to cross the border since the crisis began. Virtually all men, women, and children were in tears. There were wounded among them, including young children. The Mitrovica refugee had left their homes in a series of villages anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks ago, and they have been wandering on foot ever since in a Mandarin odyssey. They stayed for several weeks in a village identified as Zablace in Istok area, and the group had walked the last stretch to the border virtually non-stop for 3 days. The refugees said as many as 200 men has been taken out of the column before it reached the border, including some at the village identified as Landovica near Prizren. The next two slides will give you a better feeling for the refugee flow across the Kosovo border in the last 6 weeks. Here is represented the day-by-day flow into Montenegro, Fyrom, and Albania. This second chart shows the total number of refugees entered in the same 6 weeks. The next 4 slides provides information about the refugee camps' location and situation in both Fyrom and Albania. The first slide shows the location of refugees camps in Fyrom. Although the border was open in the last days, only few refugees crossed into Fyrom. There are no signs of refugees waiting to cross from the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia side. The transit center of Blaci, which normally is all 1,000, was deserted. As you can see, yesterday, 19 flights landed in Skopje, bringing the total number of aircraft landed up to 526. Here is the breakdown of refugee camp occupancy in Fyrom. As you well know, we have prepared plans to help UNHCR to move up to 6,000 refugees from Fyrom to Albania. Of course, this will depend on the willingness of those refugees to actually leave and to be resettled in this way. In Albania, the situation has been stable and supportable during the last week. Despite the large number of refugees, food supplies are not a problem, and water is sufficient for now. Food stockpiles allowed sustainment for 2 months. The Allied Force and the NATO Command are now committing their engineer unit and manpower to build as many refugee centers as possible in both Western and South Albania. This is Segrane camp. On this Segrane camp picture, is interested to know the 2 expansion areas, which once built, it will bring the camp capacity up to 40,000 refugees capacity. And talking about Segrane, Segrane was one of the 2 camps visited yesterday by the Secretary General. A few moments ago, I was with the Secretary General, who told me how impressed he was by the close relationship among the UNHCR, more than 20 NGOs organizations, and NATO, all led by a German general, to help the 30,000 refugees that they are there now. This is the camp of Bojane. And this is the Stenkovac 1 camp.
Wurden jedoch nicht gemacht. Ausländische Journalisten berichteten, rund 250 Soldaten hätten am Morgen nahe Merdare das Kosovo verlassen. Die NATO nannte dies angesichts der Truppenstärke von 40.000 Soldaten bedeutungslos.
Im Kosovo sind nach Angaben des
Besuch gab's Apfelsinen. Ansonsten ist die Verpflegung nicht eben üppig, wie die Frauen im Lager berichten. Immerhin, sie können ihr Essen selbst zubereiten. Spitale gilt unter den albanischen Flüchtlingscamps als Lager Deluxe. Knapp 3.000 Vertriebene sind hier bisher untergekommen. Bis zu 12.000 sollen hier eine Bleibe finden. Innenminister Schily vom Lager Çatrum im Süden des Landes kommend sprach gegenüber den albanischen Behörden jedoch auch ganz offen die Probleme an, die GTZ und THW bei Bau und Organisation des Lagers haben. Schily betonte auch hier wieder, dass eine Evakuierung der Vertriebenen nach Westeuropa nur in Ausnahmefällen in Frage kommen könne.
Ja. Es darf auch kein Eindruck entstehen, als ob wir die Vertreibung als endgültig anerkennen. Deshalb muss der Wille und die Hoffnung bei den Vertriebenen erhalten bleiben, dass sie zum frühestmöglichen Zeitpunkt in den Kosovo zurückkehren können.
Eben das wird freilich schwer genug sein, denn die Vertriebenen werden ihre Heimat weitgehend zerstört vorfinden. Alle diese Menschen hier berichten von barbarischen Aktionen der serbischen Soldateska im Kosovo. Dieser Mann berichtet, wie ein Mann mit seinen 2 Söhnen vor seiner Familie ermordet wurde. Und trotzdem, alle hier wollen zurück ins Kosovo.
Premierminister Blair ist heute mit dem internationalen Karlspreis der Stadt Aachen geehrt worden. Damit werden sein persönlicher Einsatz für den Frieden in Nordirland und die Hinwendung Großbritanniens zur Europäischen Union gewürdigt. Die Auszeichnung wurde ihm von Oberbürgermeister Linden im Rathaus übergeben. In seiner Dankesrede ging Blair besonders auf den Jugoslawienkrieg ein und verteidigte die NATO-Angriffe als gerechten Krieg.
He said, I met one of my relatives. He told me not to go back because there were snipers on the balconies. Minutes after I left, the man was killed. I found him. Back in Pristina, no one could go out because of the Serb policemen in the streets. It was terrible to see our children. They were so hungry. Finally, I tried to go shopping. 4 armed men jumped out and said, we're going to kill you if you don't get out of here. My daughters were crying day and night. We were hearing stories about rape. They begged me, please get us out of here. So we joined thousands of people going through the streets at night toward the train station. In the train wagons, police were tearing up passports, taking money, taking jewelry. Another refugee reported the Serbs surrounded us. They killed 4 children because their families did not have money to give to the police. They killed them with knives, not guns. Another recalled the police came early in the morning. They executed almost 100 people. They killed them all, women and children. They set a fire and threw the bodies in. A pregnant woman watched Serb forces shoot her brother in the stomach. She said, my father asked for someone to help this boy, but the answer he got was a beating. The Serbs told my brother to put his hands up, and then they shot him 10 times. I saw this. I saw my brother die. Serb forces, their faces often concealed by masks, as they were before in Bosnia, have rounded up Kosovar women and repeatedly raped them. They have said to children, go into the woods and die of hunger. Last week in Germany, I met with a couple of dozen of these refugees, and I asked them all in turn to speak about their experiences. A young man, I'd say 15 or 16 years old, stood up and struggled to talk. Finally, he just sat down and said, Kosovo, I cannot talk about Kosovo. 9 of every 10 Kosovar Albanians now has been driven from their homes. Thousands murdered, at least 100,000 missing. Many young men led away in front of their families. Over 500 cities, towns, and villages torched. All this has been carried out, you must understand, according to a plan carefully designed months earlier in Belgrade. Serb officials pre-positioned forces, tanks, and fuel, and mapped out the sequence of attacks. What were the soldiers going to do? What were the paramilitary people going to do? What were the police going to do? Town after town has seen the same brutal procedures. Serb forces taking valuables and identity papers, seizing or executing civilians, destroying property records, bulldozing and burning homes, mocking the fleeing. We and our allies, with Russia, have worked hard for a just peace. Just last fall, Mr. Milosevic agreed under pressure to halt a previous assault on Kosovo, and hundreds of thousands of Kosovars were able to return home. But soon he broke his commitment and renewed violence. In February and March, again we pressed for peace, and the Kosovar Albanian leaders accepted a comprehensive plan, including the disarming of their insurgent forces, though it did not give them all they wanted. But instead of joining the peace, Mr. Milosevic, having already massed some 40,000 troops in and around Kosovo, unleashed his forces to intensify their atrocities and complete his brutal scheme. Now, from the outset of this conflict, we and our allies have been very clear about what Belgrade must do to end it. The central imperative is this: the Kosovars must be able to return home and live in safety. For this to happen, the Serb forces must leave. Partial withdrawals can only mean continued civil wars with the Kosovar insurgents. There must also be an international security force with NATO at its core. Without that force, after all they've been through, the Kosovars simply won't go home. Their requirements are neither arbitrary nor overreaching. These things we have said are simply what is necessary to make peace work. There are those who say Europe and its North American allies have no business intervening in the ethnic conflicts of the Balkans. They are the inevitable result, these conflicts, according to some, of centuries-old animosities, which were unleashed by the end of the Cold War restraints in Yugoslavia and elsewhere. And the truth is that a lot of what passes for common wisdom in this area is a gross oversimplification and misreading of history. The truth is that for centuries, these people have lived together in the Balkans and southeastern Europe with greater or lesser degree of tensions, but often without anything approaching the intolerable conditions and conflicts that exist today. And we do no favors to ourselves or to the rest of the world when we justify looking away from this kind of slaughter